Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for sticking with us and coming back to actually the next episode for the show of conversation. It's your host again, it's Kwame, and thank you very much for watching the previous episodes. If you haven't watched it, please, it's not too late. Just take your time after watching this one. Just go back and actually catch up on the conversations you've missed so far. As always, I tell you, my guests are always special. Today, too, is another amazing guest who has actually taken a seat in the couch next to me to help us to actually understand certain things that we do not actually understand within our community when it comes to mental health. So, before we start, you already know the tradition if you've been following us. If you have not been following us, take your time to actually subscribe. Welcome to the family. If it's your first time joining us, we start with a quote, and most of the quotes are written by me. This is one that is actually written by me. So today's quote is: we are put through a desperate time to unveil our inner strength, push our faith against our boundaries, or open new opportunities for us. When you are experiencing a challenging moment, ask yourself, which is God bringing into my life? A few have achieved all, some achieved a portion, but many missed it all. It is at that time you seek strength from God, but not to give up. Without wasting much time, I would like to actually introduce my guest. So, my guest today is an award winning social entrepreneur and a qualified psychological therapist specialized in CBT. You'll get to know what that stands for. Been in mental health space for the past 8 years, and her interest lies in using culturally sensitive approaches to work with individuals who are experiencing depression, anxiety, and other forms of mental health disorders. She's worked with a lot of leading organizations such as JP Morgan, BBC, NHS, Victim Support, Virgin Group, and a whole lot of other companies. It's no other guest or it's no other person than Vanessa Boachie. Woo! Give me that round of applause.
Oh wow.
How are you doing, Vanessa?
I'm good. I'm blessed.
That's great.
Alive and well. Can't complain. So I'm good. Yes.
That's great. Thank you very much for also accepting my invitation
Thank you for inviting me.
because I know how busy you are and how much work it takes as an entrepreneur and also as a 9 to 5 worker. We will delve much into it, but I really appreciate you being an expert in that field, sitting next to me and want to actually share your knowledge with my guest. So going straight into it, talk us through your journey in your education growing up. East London, I believe.
Yes.
East Side represented.
Yes. Born and raised in East London.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I guess I actually went to. You might have heard of Brampton Manor Academy.
It's famous in London.
Yes,
for good reasons.
The famous Brampton Manor Academy.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I went to Brampton before it actually became one of the best schools in London. So
Yeah.
I went to Brampton when it wasn't what's
Popping.
the most it
Everybody,
wasn't the
no one
best
wants to
school.
go there.
Yeah, when no one actually
Yeah.
wants to go there. So but I actually enjoyed my school experience. I did really well in school. Got high grades, did really well in my GCSEs.
Fantastic.
A's, A stars. So yeah, I was what they describe as a gifted and talented student. Yeah,
You
so
had it all.
so I was put into that category, and it's so interesting because before I actually got into psychology, I actually wanted to go into drama. So I wanted to be a theatre director. I wanted to be an actor. That's what I wanted to go into. So whilst I was going to Brampton, I even was going to drama school at the same time because that's what I wanted to pursue. But of course, as we know, if you're living in a African household,
Ghanaian to be specific.
Ghanaian to be very specific.
Yeah.
Do you know what? It wasn't. My mom didn't actually say, don't do this,
Yeah.
don't follow the creative route. It was more just hints like, oh, is this really going to get you a job? Are you going to be able to succeed in this field? And I think there was a lot of that, so I absorbed it and I internalized it. So in the end, I ended up dropping out of drama school.
But you still love drama.
I love it. I love it. I love theatre. Um, and yeah, I try to go to theatre every month. Just to watch, to inspire myself. I've actually had the opportunity to put on my own theatre production as well, which I'll go into a little bit more
Wow.
later on. So yeah, absolutely love. I'm a creative at heart, basically.
That's
So
good.
that's something I really enjoy. So, um, sixth form, I studied psychology, economics, religious studies, did critical thinking as well. I did okay with my A
That's
levels.
always where the stuff
Did
goes
okay.
broke.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
relatively okay. And then I ended up studying psychology at the University of Leicester. So I actually didn't get into the university that I wanted to go to.
Which is
So do you know what? I wanted to go to Oxbridge, either Oxford or Cambridge.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I ended up not getting the grades for that. So I had to go through clearing and yeah,
Went to Leicester.
went to
Leicester
Leicester.
too is really
Leicester is a good,
it's a good university. I
yeah,
must say. Yeah.
yeah. And I think at the time Leicester was, I believe, eighth in the league tables for psychology.
That's
So
impressive.
yeah, I think it was a blessing.
Yeah.
It was a blessing, and I
Because
really,
sometimes God actually diverts
that's right,
our paths in a certain
exactly.
way, honestly speaking. That it really befits the quote I just gave because when you start to experience certain things in your life, you have to ask, what is God trying to actually tell me?
Yeah.
What does he want me to actually achieve? Because a lot of
Exactly.
people will just throw in the towel, like, you know what, I've given up. But you still pursued going through clearing
Yeah.
because I went through the same path in clearing and I know the kind of mental trauma it brings because all your friends are on the other side celebrating. Some have taken the decision that, you know what, they're just going back to actually redo their A levels. Some are saying that, you know what, forget about university, I'm going to employment. But you stood on your grounds, pick up the phone, call different universities without any doubt of shame, started calling because a lot of people see clearing as a shame. It's like name and shame. But I was like, no, clearing is not name and shame. Clearing is where you tend to actually measure your strength. Because with me, in my situation, what I did was I told my mom, I actually received the message early on at home. I woke up, went on my what's the name of it? Personal statement site, what's the name? UCAS.
UCAS, yeah.
UCAS, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on UCAS website, it sounds funny, but that was the reality. I went to the UCAS website and there's no university for me. I went, I told the truth to my mom, like, Mom, I didn't get anything. But with God and the faith I have, I'll come up with a university. I went in front, I went to school, and I saw one of my teachers coming. She thought that I'm really hit. Then I'm like, you don't know the person you're dealing with. I'm stronger than even this. I'm just going there, pick up my results, start calling universities. And that's what actually happened. Before 12 o'clock, I had a university.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. And that's why they say rejection is always redirection as well. Yeah. And I think for me, the process was a tiny little bit different to yours in the sense where I cried. I was like, oh, that means I'm not going to university. That means, the plans that I had is not going to go into fruition. But then I think after the crying,
you gain the strength.
That's when you sort of try and put things together and think about what's next and what your next steps are. And then I think by me going to Leicester was actually a blessing because there were so many opportunities that came in Leicester. And before I was going to university, the advice that I was given was to make use of every single opportunity that comes up.
Yeah.
So I was doing everything, even if it wasn't related to psychology, I was doing it just to try it out because what I find is a lot of people say, oh, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what my values are. I don't know what my strengths are. I don't know what to do next. The only way you'll be able to find your passion is not by waiting for it, it's by trying out different things. And then from that, you'll be able to know, okay, this is something that I don't really like. It doesn't really work for me. So let me move on to something else. So that's what it was for me, even though I knew that I went into university with the vision of becoming a clinical psychologist. If it was something events related, I was trying it out. If it was becoming a university ambassador, I was trying it out.
Yep.
If it was to do with, we had a period of time where different companies were looking for content creators within universities to do content for their brands. I was there. I was literally doing every
Everything.
single thing. And I think that's what helped me to get skills to be able to, years later, put into my business
Yes.
to be able for it to be where it is. But back onto the journey
Yep.
itself. So studied psychology. Very, very grateful that I graduated with a first class degree. That was, do you know what? Even with that, I remember I told myself that I'm going to get a first class.
That's
And
it.
this was despite after my first year, I think I got overall about 55%. And that literally blew my confidence.
Yep.
It blew my confidence, but I still told myself, Vanessa, you are going to get a first class, to the extent where I wrote it down on a piece of paper and stuck it onto my wall. So that was what I was looking at every day.
That's it.
I'm going to get a first class, and I prayed about it, put the work in, and yeah, was able to graduate with a first class. Thank you.
Fantastic.
But then,
Yeah. We'll come to that. We'll come to the follow up.
yeah,
We'll come to the
okay,
follow up.
okay,
Definitely, we'll come to the follow
sure.
up. So, if you are watching this, if you just tune in, this is the Shop Conversation. We are here seated with Vanessa Boachie, a well-resourced social entrepreneur, and also a psychologist who is actually helping our community with their skills, with their knowledge in psychology, to be able to help us with our mental health. So coming back to you, Vanessa, you went to Uni of Leicester. Let's take it back a little bit. How was growing up in East London like? Because whenever we hear East London, and you bear with me, all of us who grew up in London, and I wasn't born in London, but I've actually lived in London the major part of my life. I've heard a whole lot of stuff about East London, and when I talk about East London, there are certain places that immediately you actually make mention of. One thing comes into people's mind, and that is crime, that is theft, that is gang related, and culture and everything. Growing up over there, how was it like? How did that shape you in terms of molding you to be the person that you are today?
That's a really, really good question. So I grew up, this is probably going to give my age away, but I grew up during the time where gang violence was on the high. And it was a bit of a scary time. I wasn't directly involved in anything, but people around me were involved in lots of different things. And going to a school in East London where one day you're in the classroom with someone, or one day you're seeing someone in the corridor, you're saying hi, you're having a conversation, and the next day they're not there anymore. That itself was quite scary.
Yeah.
It was quite scary. And I remember there were a couple of occasions where police will actually come to our assemblies and request for anyone who has evidence and show us CCTV of a young black boy being chased by a group of people on a bike, and of course being witnessing that on a regular basis. That itself, I think at that time you don't really take it in, but then
You tend to internalize it.
over time it tends to become internalized.
Yeah.
So there's been multiple incidents where things like that have happened in school. I've witnessed really brutal acts of violence as well outside of school. Even, where I grew up as well. There was a time where I was, sitting down watching Netflix and just literally relaxing after a long week, just using that to wind down. And then all of a sudden I hear a bang. And with that bang, I thought, wait, is this something that I heard on the TV? Or is
Is
this
it
something
outside?
that I heard outside? Or is this something that I heard in my head? So my brother's name is Kwame as well. So I called my brother. I was like, Kwame, did you hear that? And he was like, no, he didn't hear anything. So I was thinking, okay,
Maybe.
what's
Is there
going
something
on?
going on in your head?
Yeah, what's going on? And then moments later, I hear a really deep groan, it's almost like it wasn't a scream, it was like a groan from a male. You could hear that the voice was of someone who's a male.
In pain.
In pain, yeah. And then let's say about 5 minutes later, we're hearing police sirens.
Sirens.
Yeah, police sirens. Looking outside my window, and there's again a young black boy laying on the floor, suffering from gun wounds.
Yeah.
So things like that will happen. There's been times where outside of the estate that I grew up in, there'll be like a pool of blood.
Oh, you're an estate girl as well?
Yeah, I grew up in the hood, darling. Grew up in the hood. Yeah. Where there's literally a pool of blood, white tent. And as soon as you see the white tent,
you know that there's investigation going on.
Exactly. As soon as you see the tape as well, you could even tell the difference between the blue tape and the red tape because you've seen it so many times.
You've seen it so, like,
yeah.
you have been exposed to it that
yeah.
you end up becoming a detective yourself.
Exactly.
Because as a young person, you're going, for example, you've had a good day at school. You've had when I mean good day, you have been the spotlight. Everybody you've got this test, you've done well. You're coming home, you're coming to tell your parents, and by the time you realize there's a tent set up. Like, in your head, what do you, how were you taking it? Would you say that there came a time whereby you felt like, you know what, I'll get used to this?
Do you know what's funny? I believe I actually became desensitized to it, where like I would hear stuff happening to young black boys, and I don't know, just because of how regularly it was happening, it wouldn't affect me as much. But I think the part that really did affect me was because my younger brother, he was around that age group where you might classify them as vulnerable, quote unquote, if they're growing up in that area. And anytime my brother was to go out and I'm not with him, I would not be able to sleep. My heart will be beating the whole time until he sets foot in the house. That's when I'll be okay.
Like, you know what? He's in the house.
And even to the extent where I think when these incidents happen so close to home, sometimes I recall a couple of occasions where coming outside of my house, you're almost looking around. You're not.
You become hyper vigilant.
You don't feel at ease. That's what I was looking for. You don't feel at ease until you've entered the comfort of your home. So things like that. And I think the challenging thing about it is the anxiety that it brings.
Because I feel like I've had similar experience, because I moved into this country at the time whereby there was high rate of violence. And I'll be honest with you, I moved into this country, my first summer was when the London riots was.
Oh, okay.
My first ever summer. So you can imagine.
Okay.
I live in a peaceful place, everything is going on. Then boom, your first summer in London is violence, is protest by young people. I was in secondary school as well. So I was like, what the heck? I started getting phone calls. People were actually asking, are you okay? Because I've heard that London, this thing is going on. I was like, you know what? I'm far away from it. They were like, you make sure that you don't go closer to that place, because apparently the police is actually on the road. If they see you, they're going to actually start chasing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, thank you, because I'm far away from there, but I've been following what is going on in London at the moment. So thanks for reaching out to actually find out what is actually going on. So reading newspapers was also on ease. Reading newspapers, there's been a violence here. There's been this person has been stabbed to death. I was like, what the heck? Like, when is this going to actually end? So I had a similar upbringing, or similar kind of growing, the kind of situations and the kind of news you hear is violence upon violence upon violence. That even motivated me to actually join the youth forum, which later on I actually became the chair of the M for Youth Parliament.
Okay.
Because I wanted to make a change, because I was like, till when is this thing going to end?
Yeah, and I think people don't recognize the communal trauma that comes with it, especially as these things will happen, and then we're all expected to go back to school like nothing has happened and
That's the
everything is
insane bit
normal.
about it. I'm like,
Yeah.
can they actually organize an assembly whereby we'll get a psychologist? We'll come to that because I feel like these kind of things, as you said, that we'll grow up, we internalize it. Then when we grow up and we find ourselves in a different environment and we cast our mind back, realize that is this the trauma that we've passed through, seeing blood, thinking that it's normal to see people lying down. Then later I was like, you know what, nah, I feel like
Yeah.
I've been traumatized.
Yeah, and I think it's I think children and young people can be very resilient,
Yes,
and so
we
as a
can.
result of that, you learn to keep on going, or depending on the messages that you've learned about how to deal with trauma and how to deal with challenges. I think for me personally, the message was we keep it moving, we keep
True.
going. So as a result of that, I kept on going, I kept it moving. And that's why, to a certain extent, I became a little bit desensitized to these things. And if you really think about it, these are horrific things. People are dying. There's mothers, screaming and wailing because their sons and daughters have passed away. And I think for me, that developed a bit of a fear around being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like I mentioned, I wasn't involved in anything directly, but just that fear of being
true,
in
the
the wrong
people
place in the
around
wrong
you.
time, because it happened. There had been news articles where a young black female at a chicken and chip shop, and she's just buying chicken and chips, and all of a sudden there's a drive-by,
Very short.
they get the wrong person, she's shot, and she's dead.
That was one of the things I was always scared of because
Yeah.
I'm like, because this is the thing, growing up in the black community, if you've not got friends who are part of a gang, you haven't got friends who have got a bad reputation, a bad record, our parents think you're safe because you don't play with those people. So one incident happened whereby one young man from Ghana, like he came to this country like myself, coming to study. He was with a friend, not knowing that guy is gang affiliated. Unfortunately, when he reached the block whereby he's basically stepped over his boundary because he's beyond his territory, the other person felt threatened. They started running after them. Because he was with that guy, the guy knew the danger that is coming. So he was able to run. But the one who doesn't know anything about this was the one caught in the middle. Unfortunately, when they killed him, they realized that they killed the wrong person. So that helped to actually change my mentality that, you know what, I don't think this thing is about someone being gang affiliated. Anyone, if we don't talk about it, all of us are going to be victims of it because they can catch the wrong person. They can because this is the thing, the person who's doing the drive-by, they might have actually got the specific features of the person. What if I befit the specific features? Does that mean I end up becoming the target without harming anyone? And by the time they realize they've got the wrong person. So
yeah, it's scary. And a while ago, I think this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote a article on the psychological impacts of growing up in the hood. So it's currently on the Out Wellbeing website. And
I'm going to read it.
yeah,
Definitely, I'm going to read it. And
it.
we're going to actually end up having it at the bottom of this conversation for people to actually have an insight. As I said, Vanessa over here is an expert. Hence, for every resource that we can get from her to be able to actually help our community heal from trauma, we're definitely going to do so and support her work as well. We will come to that. So stay glued to your seats and follow up with this conversation that we're having. So you've gone to University of Leicester, you've got your BS in psychology, you've gone to Uni of Reading, gone to actually get another degree done. Then you proceeded to actually go to King's College London, which is
wow, you've done your
amazing.
research.
I did my research.
You've done your
which
research.
is amazing because casting your mind back, growing up at where you actually end up growing, because people think once you were born in an estate or raised in an estate or lived in an estate in one part of your life, it means there's been boundaries and there's going to be some form of restrictions to how high you can actually go in terms of education, in terms of wealth, in terms of creating something great out of your life. Did you see yourself reaching this high, going through all this education system, or was it a pursuit of some form of answers from your community that made you became resilient, that, you know what, I'll continue studying. I want to be that example. I want to break these boundaries. I want to break these barriers. Or is the demand from the pathway you've chosen as a psychologist that ended up making you want to learn more?
That's a really interesting question. I think I never set out my journey for it to be exactly what it is today. And I think no one ever does. But one thing that I knew, which was instilled into me, so shout out to my mom and shout out to my family and
Shout out to
to
Mumsy, Popsy and the family. Yeah.
One thing that was instilled in me was I knew I was going to be great. I knew that. I knew that I had greatness in me, not because of who I am, not because of what anything is, just because I had God on my side. So I knew that whatever I set myself out to do, it will be great. And not to say that it made the journey easier, because if anything, it makes it even harder when you have this vision for yourself.
Exactly.
One thing I knew for sure is I did not want to be a statistic. I remember, I think it was in school. I think it was in school where they were talking about statistics around social economic background and being able to achieve particular things. And I think it was I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was something along the lines of people who look like me or people who grew up where I grew up will not be able to achieve particular things, or will not be able to go to Russell Group universities or earn particular incomes and things like that.
Which Kings is actually a Russell Group. Leicester is a Russell Group.
Yeah.
So you were not a statistic, as you said.
Yeah, that was one thing that I told myself. I'm not going to be a statistic. I don't know exactly where I'm going to end up, but I know that I'm going to be great. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you went on to study psychology, and right now you're a psychotherapist. Am I right?
Yes, I'm a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist.
Can you talk us through what the role is all about? Because it's actually a mouthful, but
it is.
definitely you are playing a great role.
Thank you. So I think sometimes people get the term psychologist and psychotherapist mixed up.
Educators.
Yes. So typically a psychologist would have had a doctorate. So they would have gone through the doctorate process. They will have doctor in front of their name. To be able to afford themselves to be a psychologist, they may be, I guess, trained in lots of different areas within psychology, typically. With a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist, what I do is work with people on a one-to-one basis to look at the link between how they think about things and what they do. So when we look at human behavior, a big part of it is driven by the way that we think. And it's so funny because as I was even training to be a therapist, I believe that there was aspects of my training that linked back to things I already knew from the Bible. So, for example, there's a quotation that says, as a man thinketh, so he doeth. And that's essentially what CBT is about. The way that you think about things can have an impact on the way that you do things and how you feel. So essentially, my aim when I'm working in therapy with someone is to, number one, identify what is the main problem that you're experiencing. That's what you want to know. What is the main problem that you're experiencing? Number two, what is it that's keeping these problems going? So for many people, some of their issues have been going on for years and years and years. And sometimes the behaviors that we engage in or the way that we think about things can be habitual, where we're just doing it automatically. So what I really want to understand is, what is it that's maintaining your issues? What's keeping the problem going? And then the third thing that we want to look at is breaking that cycle, because sometimes it can be an ongoing cycle of you engaging in these behaviors, of you thinking in that way. So we want to introduce tools and techniques to help you break that cycle. And this could be through using thought techniques, using behavioral techniques, also mapping out that link between some of your early experiences and what we describe as your core beliefs. So some of the beliefs that you have about yourself, about the world, about your future. also looking at what we might describe as your rules for living. So everyone has rules that they live their lives by. So understanding what are some of these rules,
Like,
and
is it principles?
yeah, almost like principles that
Principles
you
of
live
living, yeah.
your life by, even on a subconscious level. So as an example, if if someone's core belief is I'm unlovable, one of their rules for living might be I always have to say yes to someone if they ask me to do something, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And
They're
so
always going to be the yes man, even
always going
if
to
they
be
can't even provide it, just to actually get accepted.
exactly. And so they may engage in what we describe as compensatory strategies. So that might be ways of overcompensating, which will be, as you highlighted, always saying yes to people at the extent of them taken away from themselves.
Yes.
So essentially, in summary, it's just about being able to identify key ways to change your thought patterns, or to make adjustments to your thought patterns, to make adjustments to the way that you're doing things in order to be able to move forward. And this typically works quite well with anxiety disorders such as OCD, PTSD, health anxiety, social anxiety, depression, even phobias as well. Typically CBT can be quite helpful for managing these disorders.
Yeah. Talking about phobias, I've actually got a phobia.
Ah, of
Yeah.
what?
I've got a phobia. Those who know the stories, it sounds a bit funny, but it's actually a phobia. In 2010, I nearly lost my life. Yeah.
Mm.
I actually nearly lost my life. Through near drowning.
Oh my gosh. Do you know, for some reason I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I knew you would say that. It's quite a
But
common experience.
it's a thing whereby I didn't want to find myself in that position, and it's something that I'm working on to be able to
Yeah.
actually end up break away from it.
I'm sorry to hear that happens.
Yeah. It started as it was my friend who actually joked, and it was a bad joke. All the time they go to the poolside, like that was back in Ghana. They go to the poolside just to actually relax as their Saturday activity and everything. And all the time too, whenever they go, I go along with them, but I don't swim because I know myself. I know my limits that I'm not. And growing up, I've heard a lot of people who have tried swimming, close ones who have tried swimming, and unfortunately they drowned and they died. So I said to myself, if I've not had a professional trainer to actually end up taking me through the process of swimming, I'm never going to actually attempt it. So we went to the pool. They were swimming. They finished swimming. After that, we were done. We were about to go. The only thing I remember was I was at the other end of the pool struggling.
Oh.
And every time I think about it, I tend to actually lose my breath, because that's how I was feeling when I was under the water. I was trying, and to date, I don't know who got me out. Always I tell people it's God, because if within a split of a second I didn't get someone to drag me out, I would have died. I'll be honest with you, I would have
How
died.
did you end up in the pool?
They pushed me.
Ah.
They finished swimming and everything, so I was just closer to the pool. The only thing I remember was I'm in the pool, but I remember being pushed and struggling. And when they pushed me, they walked off.
Just to quickly say, do you know, you mentioned that anytime you are talking about it, you become breathless.
Yes.
That itself is what we'll describe as a trauma response. So what can happen is your body keeps score.
Exactly.
Your body remembers the challenging events that you've been through. So even just as you're talking about it, it's almost like a memory. And so it mimics some of those symptoms of, having to be alert, that fight or flight response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was, the good thing is I identified it very early. That is actually true. So every time I'm being asked to swim, I tell everybody that. But I'm like, swimming too is something that that is, to me, swimming is more of a skill. It's a life-saving skill that I need to learn, which is what, so I said to myself, for me to be able to overcome this, I need to learn how to swim. Because once I get myself in that place, I realize that I've overcome my fear. It does not haunt me any longer. So in 2013, that was when it was really bad, because I did NCS.
Oh, okay.
I did NCS.
Yeah.
and one of the activities was for us to swim.
Mm.
Oh, I saw all my colleagues, they jump in the water, they jumped. It
Mm.
was left with me. I said, I'm never. As I was getting closer to the water,
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, if I jump over here, I feel like my heart will cease, it will stop working.
Mm.
So I said to myself, I don't want to create a scene over here. We are far away from our site. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So it helped me to actually end up fighting that. So it's a phobia that I'm actually end up dealing with it,
Yeah. It's a
because I know
common
all the time
phobia.
people end up making that joke that black people can't swim. But with my situation, it was more. It's not about black people can't swim. It's more of a phobia. It's a
Yeah.
situation that was a life and death
Yeah.
situation that I found myself. So
Yeah.
it's really good that you've made mention of that. Just to clarify,
Uh-huh.
CBT, is it cognitive behavioral therapist or cognitive behavioral psychotherapist?
So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what CBT is.
Mm-hmm.
Where the psychotherapy comes in is that, so I'm trained in CBT, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also trained in other forms of therapy.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So CBT is one form and psychotherapy is another form. Would you
So,
classify it that way?
okay, so the best way to look at it is
Yes.
that therapists are generally psychotherapists. If we look at what the term psychotherapist means, if you
Means of the
break it
mind.
down, mind as psyche,
Yes.
and then therapist means, I think it means dialogue. Yeah, so
Talking.
talking, being able to talk. So psychotherapist is basically a therapist, and then within that, you've got different branches of psychotherapy. So CBT is one of those forms of psychotherapy. The other strand that I'm trained in is called narrative therapy, which I absolutely love.
Yeah. Talk us through it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Narrative therapy is just based on the idea that everyone lives their life by a story that they tell themselves. And so for some people, this story that they tell themselves might be defined by their experiences. It might be defined by trauma. It might be defined by what other people have projected onto them as well. And sometimes some of these things that they're internalizing can be so traumatic that it then becomes their life story. So, for example, if someone has been through, let's say, abuse, they might label themselves as a victim, and they might may believe in their mind that they are taking on a role of a victim, and so as a result of that, their behavior and everything that they enact will be of, let's say, a victim, let's say. And so that might for some people not afford them the opportunity to feel empowered. And so narrative therapy is about creating what we might describe as a second story for your life in the direction that you want to go in. So just because you've made a mistake, it doesn't mean that you are a mistake.
Okay.
Just because you've been abused, it doesn't mean that you can't be empowered or do the things that you want to do. So it's about going in the direction that you want to go in and living the life that you want to go in, essentially by creating a new narrative for yourself.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for taking us through. To my viewers and my listeners, if you've just joined us, we are currently discussing about CBT, which is the field that Vanessa is actually specialized in. She's specialized in the field of therapy, which she is a therapist, she's a psychotherapist, and she was breaking it down for us to actually understand, which with me is being a question always on my mind that every time I meet a therapist, I wanted to actually know the differences because we keep on making that kind of error. So I hope that what Vanessa have actually explained so far helps to bring clarification to whoever is listening, whoever is watching this. So if this is your first time or if you've just tuned in, we're still on the shelf conversation. So continuing with it, what actually informed your choice of the specialty? Is it because of the environment you lived in?
Um, I would say I wouldn't say it's because of the environment that I've lived in. I think I would just say that I'm a practical person
Mm,
in terms of I love having conversations, I love speaking, I love listening, especially, which is very necessary
yes.
as a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about awareness for us to be able to actually understand what's going on. However, I believe that it doesn't stop there. I think we need practical steps to be able to actually put things into practice. So that's what makes me quite keen on cognitive behavioral therapy. So, for example, CBT works quite well with phobias like what you
Yes.
described. So let's say, for example, we're in a therapy session and you come in and you're talking to me about this phobia that you have. You're talking to me about the challenging experience that you had when you were pushed into the pool, and we're having that conversation. It's good that we're bringing that out into open, and that's really helpful to process emotions. But for you to be able to actually overcome this phobia, we need to get you outside. We need
Yes.
to get you into the pool.
Yes.
We need to do some exposure therapy.
So technically, I became a therapist for myself because I sat down, because it's so strange. I never discussed this with any therapist. I sat myself down, I spoke to one of my friends, and I'm like, I think the only way I can overcome this phobia is to get a professional trainer, get me closer to the pool. Once I jump into the pool, it will help me to have a different experience. That thing that I thought was a bed of thorns or it nearly killed me would rather be a lifesaver
Yeah.
for me, because anytime I find myself in there, I wouldn't actually process it as a place that I'm going to die. However, it's a place that
Exactly.
I'm just releasing my stress,
Yeah.
because swimming is one way or another, it's an exercise, it's a
Yeah.
cardio. My heart that would actually end up, maybe I'm scared that it's going to stop, will process normally. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I could have been a therapist.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
itself is
I
exposure
feel,
therapy. And as you can see, there's a
yeah.
difference between us just talking about it and you
Yes.
actually going out and taking those practical steps to do it.
Exactly.
That's part of rewiring of the brain. And if we think about the way that the brain works, you being able to have that practical experience is quite helpful for the brain to say and confirm that, yes, I've been able to do it. So the brain works through association and creating patterns. And so when you've had that traumatic event in the
Even, yeah.
pool, what your brain has done is paired pool equals danger. And that is the connection that has been made. So every time even the word pool comes up, that's when you start
Ventilating,
hyperventilating, or
yeah.
you see a pool, you start hyperventilating because
Ventilating.
of
You
that
see, it
link.
was not even a pool only, it was every water body.
Yeah, it
Even
could
when
be
I'm
that as well.
driving and I see a water body that
Yeah,
is really big,
yeah,
I start to even looking at the sea. The only good thing is that I was able to, when it happened, I've traveled over the English Channel about 3 or 4 times.
okay.
When I'm on it, I don't feel scared. But when I'm closer to little water bodies, which is kind of associated to pool,
Yeah,
I start to actually feel that
yeah,
scare.
yeah. And
Yeah.
again, that's back to that connection that
Connection that my brain
the
has
brain
got.
has made.
That
So it's
pool is equal to danger.
exactly. So essentially, what we want to do, whether that's something that you're doing by yourself or that's something in therapy, we want to break that pattern. We want to break that association, and you won't be able to break that association as successfully
Yes.
as talking about it.
But you have to put an
You have to
action.
actually do it. So you have to go into the pool, so then your brain can rewire and say, okay, pool does not equal danger, pool equals safety. And so the more you engage in that, the more you can actually overrun that old way of thinking, because that's an old pattern that we
Pattern.
don't want
I've been able to
anymore.
break that
You've been able to
cycle
break that cycle, and that
and
comes
rewired
through.
my brain.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I love CBT.
I
I
think
think
my I
CBT
think
gets a lot of bad press, but I
yes.
do like CBT.
I think my therapy session is done. How much is my cost?
Well,
All right. If you're watching or you're listening to this is the Shop Conversation, having a lovely conversation with Vanessa in the couch over here. We have actually delved into CBT. We've delved into her journey into education, the environment that she grew up in, breaking the cycle, breaking the barriers that she could have actually experienced, and actually soaring higher like an eagle and actually attaining higher feet. And growing up, listening to statistics that people from her background wouldn't be able to actually end up attaining the successes that she has actually attained, like going to a Russell group. But she's gone to 2 Russell groups. Hey, no one can actually stop you. It's only God. As I
yeah.
started with my quote, whenever you're going through stuff, ask God, what is he trying to teach you? What is he trying to take you through? And Vanessa is actually a living testimony of that particular quote. And continuing with our conversation, um, we've talked about the informed choice and of of being a psychotherapist. In 2019, you had this opportunity to work as a psychological well-being and actually a psychological well-being practitioner in the NHS as your first job. How was the experience?
So that wasn't my first job. That was...
Correct me.
That was probably my third.
As within psychology?
Within the psychology field, within the mental health field.
Okay.
So when I finished university, I worked as a support worker.
Okay.
And I did that in a rehabilitation recovery home. So I was working with people who were diagnosed with psychosis, schizophrenia, severe OCD, and lots of different mental health challenges. And then I became a community support worker. So there I was working with adults who had diagnoses of autism, learning difficulties, and that was also a really great experience. I believe, both of these roles really helped to put things into perspective and just given the opportunity to work with a wide range of people. And then I came across the psychological wellbeing practitioner trainee course. And that essentially, when I saw what it was about, I was really intrigued by it. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me again was just the opportunity to learn how to support other people, but in a different way. So I actually did that at the University of Reading. Whilst I was studying there. My placement was at Oxford NHS service. So that was an amazing opportunity as well. I had a really great eye-opener into the mental health space and what it looks like within public health services as well. Again, that gave me an opportunity to work with a wide range of different people.
Fantastic. Both patients and expertise as well.
No, definitely.
Awesome. Fantastic. And currently you're working as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist in the NHS. We've already made mention of the steps in terms of therapy, because I think one of the things that a lot of people tend to shy away, which we'll get back to, we'll actually delve much into as the conversation goes along, is the moment you ask them or you end up referring them to a therapist or therapy, there is this kind of notion or there's this kind of mindset that what's wrong with me? They start to think through, but they don't end up thinking that even an incident like nearly getting knocked down by a car, but you didn't actually get knocked down, could actually end up traumatizing you, because the fact that the incident doesn't happen doesn't mean it didn't have an impact on you. Why do you think people have that kind of notion? That going to therapy is
I think
actually...
a couple of things. Well, just to go back onto something that you said, probably by the time that this comes out, I most probably will not be working within the NHS anymore by the time this comes out. Just moving on to doing private practice, and also developing Inside Out Wellbeing, which we'll get onto later on as well.
But you're still always going to be one of us. That's an NHS. Yeah, sure.
No but in terms of, I guess, why there is a big stigma
when it comes to
therapy, I think it just comes down to understanding. I think if people really understood what therapy involves and what therapy can do for you, we wouldn't label it as a waste of time. We wouldn't label it as just, speaking, because there's a lot that happens in the therapy.
Because a lot of people are like, oh, why do I have to go and open up to a random person? I believe you've heard it yourself. Why should I go and open up myself to a random person? But at the same time, I'm like, have you thought about it this way? That random person might end up being the best person, because why? They are not going to judge you. They don't even know you. So you sitting over there, they don't even know about the stuff you've done in the past.
And I think for me personally, I feel like it's less about the person. It's more about what's happening during therapy. So I think people really underestimate the benefits of therapy to the extent where, let's have a look at, I think if I didn't do psychology or
Yes.
go into that, another area that I'm really interested in is neuroscience, and just,
Which is not far from
yeah,
it.
not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess looking at the links between the mind and the body and the processes that happen in the body as well. So when we go through difficult events, of course, your body takes note of that. As we know, you go through the fight or flight response
Yeah.
for some people. Even when we look at emotions as well, emotions are not just based on feelings.
Yes.
Emotions are chemical responses to our environment and
Environment.
what's
Yeah.
going on. Imagine if you've been experiencing ongoing stress, that then is increasing cortisol in your body. So cortisol, for those of you who don't know, the stress hormone,
Hormone.
that's been increased in the body, and that's something that is happening on a biological level. So if you've got, some of you might have come across the term stress bucket before. If you haven't, just imagine.
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Okay,
Yeah.
just I can.
Demonstrate it to us.
Okay, I can just use this cup
Cup. Yeah.
as an example. Let's just say this is your stress bucket,
Yes.
and let's say anytime you experience,
Should I hold it for you?
I can hold it. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Awesome.
Anytime, let's say this stress bucket at the bottom is 0 and at the top is 100%. So anytime you experience a stressor in your life, cortisol is being released. So that's a bit of cortisol that's
Inside the stress
flowing
bucket. Yeah.
in your stress bucket. Let's say you're going throughout your day and you're at work. Work is stressful. More cortisol is being
Being poured.
released.
Yeah.
You come back home, there's arguments, there's stressors, there's pressures, things like that. More cortisol is being released. So you're going on to, let's say, social media. You're seeing people who look like you go through challenges and difficulties. More cortisol is being released. You're thinking about everything that's happening in the world. More
More
cortisol is being
cortisones.
released. So on and so forth until it reaches, let's say, 95% in the stress bucket, right? And then let's say, I don't know, you're someone at home hasn't washed the dishes and you're having a small debate
Yeah.
or argument with them, and then
It comes out.
that stress bucket starts to, I don't have enough
Overflow.
water, but
Yeah.
that stress bucket then starts to overflow. And the reason why that happens is because emotions, when emotions are not processed, when emotions are not transferred, they store. And so this is why when we're not processing these emotions by allowing ourselves to speak about things, we then hear that this person has high blood pressure. We hear that this person has diabetes. We hear that this person has chronic stress.
All because of cortisone.
We hear that this person has,
Wow.
let's say, there's even studies that show links between chronic stress and long-term health conditions such as fibromyalgia as well. So it's deep. It's really deep. It's really, really deep. And I think we really underestimate the link between stress and our health. A lot of our health difficulties can be eradicated through releasing that cortisol. And so by being able to actually speak about things, what you're doing is you're taking some of the cortisol out of this stress bucket.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, it doesn't necessarily have to be through just therapy. Therapy is not the only way to release that cortisol. It could be through physical exercise.
Yeah.
That's another way to release cortisol. It actually could also be through crying, which is something that a lot of people
Tell us more about
tend
it.
to not do.
Tell us more about it. Because a lot of
Yeah.
people end up thinking that crying is actually a sign of weakness. But I always tell people, crying is not a sign of weakness. Crying is a way of us expressing our emotions, because God actually ended up creating us and knowing that is how, as humans, we can actually express our emotions. Some animals even do cry. Some people don't even know that when a dog loses its puppy, they also express that emotion. You might not see it as cry, but it could be forms of, like, different forms of emotions. But when, as humans, we cry, especially targeting the men, they end up seeing as a sign of weakness. I remember when one of my mentors, we were at uni, he was in his final year, and unfortunately had the worst news of being told that his auntie has got less days to live because she's been
Mm,
diagnosed of end stage cancer, right?
mm,
And he was about when he received the news the following week, because it didn't actually reach the number of days, and he was called that she's passed on, so it really
mm,
affected him. He had an exam when he was going for the funeral. I told him, I was like, bro, I've been there. I lost my granddad. That was my first hit when it comes to me expressing my emotions that way.
mm.
I told him that cry. Because if you don't cry and you harbor it within yourself, you are going to come back home, carried all the trauma. Now that you're about to process everything that's happened, if you don't take care, whilst everybody has healed, you are about to actually start experiencing the pain. So express it, your pain. Don't suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important. But when people cry,
Yeah. I think it's also important to give people grace as well, because
yeah,
not everyone is going to so for example, in that scenario
yes,
where going to a funeral, some
yes,
people might express themselves there,
differently, yeah.
some people might not express themselves there, and I think that is okay because everyone's on their own
Jenny,
journey.
yeah.
But I guess if we're looking at the science behind crying, I believe that if everyone knew what the biological aspect of crying actually entailed, everyone will cry. That's my personal belief anyway. So when we look at actually what happens when we cry, like we mentioned, stressors can increase our stress hormone
The
cortisol.
zone, yeah.
What research has actually found is that when you actually do cry, in the tears is actually cortisol coming out of your body.
Really?
And so that is the reason why after you've had a good cry, you feel lighter.
It makes sense.
Yeah, you feel much lighter, you feel a bit better. It almost feels like that load has been lifted.
Lifted.
So, crying is basically when you feel that urge to cry, that is your stress bucket that has reached 99.999%.
Percent.
And perhaps something has happened that 0.001%
Percent. Yeah.
has lifted that stress bucket to its full capacity. So, when you feel like crying, essentially what that is cortisol at its capacity. And so those tears coming out is a way of being
Overflow.
able to
Release it.
release that cortisol.
Thank you for encouraging us.
So cry, let it
Don't
all
cry
out.
more.
Let it all
We will
out.
cry. We will definitely cry. And yeah, it's a thing whereby that label. I hope that this conversation that we are having, people who will get the privilege of taking their time to digest the information that we are giving, it would really help them, because I've learned a lot. Your demonstration, just letting the viewers and the listeners, if you're going to listen this on any audio streaming platform, please take the chance. If any of the episodes you've been listening it on any of the streaming audio streaming platform, i.e. Spotify or Apple, take your time and watch this on YouTube, because you understand the conversation better with the demonstrations that Vanessa has actually shown, because it will help for you to actually add a picture to it, for it to actually have a positive impact on the changes that you need to make in your life. So moving forward, I know you're going to be surprised, but you're not going to be surprised much.
Okay.
In the same 2019 that I made mention of, one of your workshop sessions, there was a quote that I actually found and is really, really interesting
Okay.
from your workshop session. The person, I'll give the name of the person later if
Oh,
you'll be able
okay.
to remember.
Okay.
It says that it's so rare to have people being frank and open about their experiences, and also relatable in an engaging and expansive way. I know that a lot of us came away from the session thinking differently about the number of issues. And this quote was actually from Dami.
Okay.
You've got a social entrepreneur company, which is Inside Out London, and you do a lot of stuff. And this is coming from one of your workshop sessions. How did Inside Out London come about?
So I guess we are Inside Out Wellbeing rather than Inside Out London.
Inside
So
Out Wellbeing.
we work across the UK. In terms of how Inside Out came about, I think Inside Out was one of those things. I don't think there was a one particular experience that led me to think, okay, this is something that I need to start. I believe that there were lots of different things that were happening in my life which I couldn't even make sense of. which later on it sort of occurred to me that okay, this is probably something that I need to do. So I remember back to one of my early experiences, as we've spoken about early experiences growing up in East London, growing up in the hoods, and all of that good stuff, which I wouldn't trade for the world, because that shaped me. That's made me who I am.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
I remember I went through a period of time where I would experience heart palpitations and tightness in my chest, and I would get like a weird feeling in my stomach. And I genuinely believed that there was something wrong with me. And because it kept on happening in my chest, I was probably maybe around 15 at that time, but I genuinely believed that I had a heart condition. I felt like there was something wrong with me, and I felt that, and I believed that I was going to die.
Wow.
So that was ongoing for a long time, and it's so funny because I told my mom about it, that my chest is hurting me, and guess what her response was? She's like, "Oh,
Ebeko.
that," and she said, "What did she say? Kofa Rob,
Yeah.
ASO, like go and put a Rob on it."
Yeah, for
I
our
was just like-
non-Ghanaian listeners or viewers, Ebeko means it will go away, which
Yeah.
is a common response that we get from our parents when we end up actually complaining that we're experiencing something. But that doesn't mean they don't take it serious, but it's just a way of they soothing us for us to actually believe that it's not nothing big without being controlled. So
Yeah.
that was just by the jovial side of it, yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what Rob is like it's like Vicks.
It's like basically Vicks, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Ghanaian version.
Every Ghanaian version of Vicks. So if you know what Vicks is, that is what it's very, very chilly ointment that we apply when we are experiencing body pain. So yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, just put Vicks on it and it'll go. But it wasn't going, and I was sad and I was in pain and I was just in agony because this was happening around my chest area. Yeah. So again, I felt that I was literally going to die at some point. So I remember one time it got really bad, so I called up the 111 service and I described my symptoms to the person over the phone, and she mentioned that the symptoms that I'm experiencing are quite similar to anxiety.
Is it anxiety?
Said anxiety, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I didn't do anything with that, so I just left it. And then fast forward to when I was 17, someone who was close to me at the time, they were going through their own challenges. And after having a conversation with them, they were still quite distressed. I was 17, I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know what to do, etc. And then this person actually started running towards a bridge. So they're running, I'm chasing after them, like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Don't know what to do. So okay, I'm gonna call your mum because that's what I need to do. I need to call your mum. Luckily I had their mum's number. But then the person was like to me, if you call my mum, then I'm gonna jump. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I said, I'm gonna call the police. If you call the police, I'm gonna jump. Yeah. So this person was faster than me. They were running, and I just called the police because that was the first thing that I knew to do. But they weren't aware that I was calling the police. So got to the bridge. I can even picture this bridge in my head where there was a motorway underneath where cars were literally going at 70, 80 plus miles per hour, etc. So they literally started to climb over, had their leg over the bridge, like half of their body off the bridge, half of their body on the bridge.
I'm just picturing that in my head.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It was a lot. And a couple walked past. So as they were walking, they were walking on the bridge. As they was walking past, they looked at me. I looked at them. No one said anything. And then as the person saw that there was people coming, they came back onto the platform, and everyone was just looking at each other, but no one said anything.
They were just staring.
They just looked at me. I looked at them, and then they walked off. But I think what they did, do you know sometimes eye contact says a lot. You don't need to say anything. The eye contact says a lot. So at that time, in my eyes, I'm screaming for help.
Danger, yeah.
I'm screaming for help, and I think they probably got the memo, so they called the police as well.
Oh, okay. So they walking off doesn't mean that they
It didn't mean,
ignored you.
yeah.
Like they.
But I think they didn't want to aggravate anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's a very not trying to actually cut you off. It's a very sensitive moment because I've had a fair share of that as well. I'll tell you mine when you finish yours.
Yeah. So police came, and person had come off onto the platform, and they're safe. The police asked, okay, what was going on, what was happening, and out of fear, I said nothing. I said nothing happened. The person
Because
said,
you'd be traumatized because
Yeah.
you would be like, what just happened? Like in your brain, you're
Yeah.
trying to actually process it all.
Yeah, and I also didn't want to get my friend into trouble as well at that time. Like I mentioned, I was just 17. I didn't have a clue, didn't know what to do. So friend said nothing had happened. I said nothing had
has happened.
happened.
Okay.
And all they did was basically drop us home, and then gave us like some leaflets and etc. And then the next day they gave a call to see if everything was okay.
Did the police sense anything that something has gone wrong? I know that they will ask what's going on, but from their experience in their job and from their aura around that environment, what they came to see, did they sense something that
I think
something has really gone on, but you guys don't want to open up?
I think so, but there's only much they can do.
They can do, yeah. If you don't say anything,
if
then
nothing is said, I wouldn't blame them for that because they can't do anything.
they can force
about it.
you
They
to
can't
actually
force
get information
anyone.
out.
Exactly.
Yeah, except from if maybe someone witnessed something. Even that, they cannot even take the account of the passerby. They will only take account of the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I've gone through similar incident. As you said, you didn't know what to do. That was a Friday evening. I was actually coming from a church event and I finished. I've actually ended up signing off. I've got work tomorrow morning, so I have to actually drive home quickly, go have my sleep. As I was about to step on the North Circular at North Middlesex, I could see that there is an ambulance parked closer to the North Circular, but it's not moving, it's just parked over there. Then, as I was about to step on the North Circular, because I'm coming from a smaller road, I was about to step on the North Circular. All I could see was, because before you step on there, you have to watch your right before you step onto the road just for safety. All I could see was a young guy who is clinged on the railings closer to the motor. I wouldn't call it a motorway, but to the high speed. It's a 50 miles per hour road. So he was clinged onto it, and I was observing the interaction he was having with the paramedic. So as I was about to move, something told me that there's something going on that you need to go and help. But I was like, but the paramedic are actually sorting it out. So why do I need to interfere? So whilst I was about to drive off, the path is clear. Right now I can't step. Then I could see that this whole struggle is about this guy wants to throw himself in the road, basically to take his life. Then all of a sudden I pulled over on the pavement and I came out. Because as you made mention of, you don't want to aggravate the situation. Because if I speak to the paramedic and his attention is switched towards me, he will lose grip of the person. The person will be able to end up doing or achieve the purpose of whatever they wanted to do. Then I quickly got closer. Like I started to actually show him some signs. It was like, so as I was going closer, I saw that this guy is getting much more energy to do what he wants to. Quickly, I just hurriedly grabbed him. I grabbed him that if I let go of him, he has got more advantage. If we let go of him, that's it. Then immediately we got grip. Thank God we were closer to a hospital. The paramedic called one of his colleagues. They quickly came. We got this guy into the car. One of the things that was going through my head was, if I had let go and I've just gone without acting like I don't really care, I don't know what to do, tomorrow that gentleman would have been a statistic. And I use that road often. I would have actually ended up not forgetting this, that I could have saved someone else's life. And I'm happy that I did. Because in that moment, as you described, as you were saying it, that was why I was just processing and internalizing it. It's not easy. you would do you would do the most. You would do the abnormal stuff just to save the person's life. Because if I describe the scene of what was going over there, it was sad. I could remember the words that he was just like saying out loud. I don't want to do this any longer. I don't want to leave. I just want to go. Leave me. Just leave me. And I'm like, no, you can't. We need you here. I don't know him, but I was just trying to pour positive words in him that we need you here. And from his detail, he was just 17. And I was like, to me, I've done everything that I could to be able to actually get the person back to life. So it's really traumatizing. Anyone who is listening to this conversation or is watching this, who has been in this situation, who has been affected, we are going to leave details of the relevant points that you could actually get the support. Maybe you have not been able to gotten over it. We are here to actually end up supporting. So there's going to be details. If you are someone who is listening or watching, who yourself you've gone through it of making that attempt to take your life and you're being affected by this conversation as well, there's going to be support that is going to be provided at the bottom of this conversation for you to actually reach out and contact. You are not alone. That's the reason why we're having this conversation, to make sure that we end up clearing the airs and also clearing the path to make sure that conversation like this thrive within our community and also support people.
Yeah.
So there is this thing I always do whenever I sit down with people. I always want us to, because we are both coming from a science background, because psychology also has to do with science. So there's this paper that I found online whilst I was actually doing research about this topic. And it was written by Kamal Deeb, and it was Neil in 2018. And the title of the paper was Effective Psychotherapy in Racially and Culturally Diverse Society. And basically, what this article was actually focused on is addressing the inequalities in conducting psychotherapy effectively with racially and ethically diverse population. And it even states, even highlighted within the NHS, this is an American paper, by the way, but I was so surprised that they were able to actually end up crossing over from the American health system and coming to the NHS. And they said, it states that within the NHS, there are only a few training experiences that include attention to racial and cultural implication for effective therapy. So based on that, what I've read, my question is, how important is it for society, especially the Black community, to consider therapy sessions after a difficult or traumatic experience in different stages in their life? And my second question, because I believe you'll be able to answer all in one, my second question is, are the people who are providing psychotherapy, do they understand the barriers in terms of race and culture, its implication on effective psychotherapy?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because, for example, when I was doing my training in CBT, we briefly touched upon diversity. We briefly touched upon race and ethnicity, but I don't think we went into as much depth as needed. So even areas such as racial trauma, that's something that I myself have gone off to go and study in a bit more detail. And it is a shame, but having said that, I think there are steps being put in place for people to actually, for I guess therapists and clinicians and practitioners to do more in that field. In terms of being able to access therapy, I guess people from racialized and ethnically minoritized backgrounds, I might be quite biased because I'm a therapist and say that it's something that I feel is fundamental. Just being able to actually sit down and reflect and process. However, I would also say in the same breath that you don't need to have therapy to be able to process. So if we even think back to the way that our ancestors and the generations before us, how they dealt with issues,
Shoes, yeah.
they dealt with things in a communal way where they had community support.
The sense of community.
Yeah, where they were able to actually share their difficulties in a community setting where they had people that they can trust, where they had people that they valued, where they had people or elders who would give advice.
Counsel is sound one. Yeah.
And even with that, that's a form of being able to process and release some of those emotions. So I think it's just about finding a way that works for you. And that's essentially why I set up Inside Out Wellbeing in the first place as well. So, with that, I believe in mental health education. I believe that mental health literacy is fundamental. So, for example, with the experiences that I've had, with the experiences that you had, we had a commonality there where we didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to articulate this experience because we didn't have the mental health literacy to be able to say that this is what this is. And if you're not able to do that, how can you then get the support? So one thing that Inside Out Wellbeing is quite centered around is being able to provide that mental health literacy and mental health support. So we're broken into 3 strands, or we have 3 strands.
Talk us through it.
We have a strand that works with the community. We have a strand that works in universities, and then we've got a strand that works with corporates in the workplace. So with the work that we do in the community, it's about being able to increase access to wellbeing support. So this could look like a workshop based on understanding trauma.
I believe that's where Dami found you.
Yes. Or understanding anxiety, understanding imposter syndrome, racial trauma, all of these different topics that we look at to educate about mental health and well-being. And a key part of it, like I mentioned, I'm really key on the practical tools. What can we actually put in place? That's where we teach people or we educate people about those practical tools. But it's not just about us, it's also about being able to form that community space where there is that sense of belonging, where there is a way of reducing loneliness as well, especially in this part of the world. We're doing things quite opposite to the way that our ancestors did.
Used to,
Where we're very individualistic, where we've come from very communal and collectivist cultures as well. So tapping into things like what I'll describe as soul care, not just self-care, but soul care. So I guess care that really taps into who you are as a person. So you've got that community aspect. And then with the universities, a similar thing there, educating people at university about how to look after their well-being. And then the work that we do with corporates is about staff well-being. And then also we train management teams and train staff teams to be able to support
their workers.
Their staff members from diverse communities, and also support their beneficiaries as well. So we've worked with councils, we've worked with public services, we've worked with prison services as well, to be able to train them, to be able to provide what we describe as culturally informed support for the people that they are working with. So essentially that's basically why Inside Out is in place. But back to the question that you said, I think therapy I believe is important, but I believe it's one piece of the puzzle. Because therapy is typically done on a one-to-one basis, and someone might have that support on a one-to-one basis and then go back into their family setting where there's a lot of challenges happening. So we need to look at where we can tap into different areas of the problem, be in therapy, be in community support, being working on the biological aspects of things, being working on the psychological aspect of things, the social aspects of things. I think we need to work in a holistic way to be able to support our communities.
We have to work in a holistic ways in order for us to support our community. This is where time would actually allow us. Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
have really learned a lot.
I'm so glad.
I have really it didn't feel like an interview. Did it feel
No,
like
it didn't. It didn't.
It felt like
I'm a bit
I'm
of a
just
chatterbox, so I could talk forever.
yeah. Then you are basically like myself because I can talk for forever, but unfortunately, this is where time will actually allow us to be able to end our conversation. If you are listening to this is the self conversation that you just listened to. If you're watching this is the self conversation that you just watched. And thank you very much for tuning in. And I am really glad that I actually had this conversation because I believe that a lot of people within our community needed to hear this or needed to watch this for them to understand the impact of stress, because stress does not only affect your mental health, it
Mm-hmm.
also goes along to affect your physical health. It affects other organs like your heart. It has effect on other aspects of your body like your pancreas, your endocrine system. It affects so many places because the body is actually not, it doesn't function as one it functions as one unit. It does not function individually. An effect on one organ can have the down effect on the other. So we have to make sure that we end up putting ourselves in the right position of not allowing stress to go too much into us. So once again, thank you very much, Vanessa. And if
Thanks
you're
for
watching
having me.
this, I really appreciate your time. And this is where time will allow us. Until then, thank you very much and stay blessed. Oof.
Woo!
Done
Thank you.
this.